الشيطان الرجيم. أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين. وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم. وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. وسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. بسند صحيح عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليه السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال السلام عليك يا فاطمة فقلت عليك السلام قال إني أجد في بدني ضعفا فقلت له أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف فقال يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به وصرت أنظر إليه فإذا وجهه يتلألأ كالبدر في ليلة كمامه وكماله. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمه، وقلت عليك السلام يا غرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال يا أمه إني أشم إنك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء فقال السلام عليك يا جده يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. وما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمه. فقلت وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا غرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء فقال السلام عليك يا جداه، السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت نعم وهو مع بلديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء فقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له عليك السلام يا أخي يا غسيب خليفتي صاحب لبائي، قد أذنت لك. ودخل علي تحت الكساء. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء فقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء. فلما اجتمعنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرف الكساء وأومع بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن صالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الانكسار. فقال الأمين جبرائيل: يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل: يا رب أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم، قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل فقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله: إنه نعم، قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الجسام، فقال لأبي: إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال لي أبي: يا رسول الله، أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي: والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي: إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
فقال النبي ثانيا: يا علي، والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر قبلنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، وفيهم محموم إلا وفرج الله همه، ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه، ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي: إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا، وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة.
So, since I've been reading from this wonderful book, the Sahifa Sajadiyya, and since we have a number of younger people in our audience today, I wanted to recite and read a few pages, a little bit of extracts from the introduction of the book, which was written by William Chittick, who is an extremely well-known historian and writer specializing in Shia Islam, amongst others. So this is from his introduction. Al-Sahifa al-Sajadiyya is the oldest prayer manual in Islamic sources and one of the most seminal works of Islamic spirituality of the early period. It was composed by the Prophet's great-grandson, Ali ibn al-Hussein, known as Zayn al-Abidin, the adornment of the worshippers, and has been cherished in Shiite sources from earliest times. Zayn al-Abidin was the fourth of the Shiite Imams, after his father Hussein, his uncle Hassan, and his grandfather Ali, the Prophet's son-in-law. Shiite tradition considers the Sahifa a book worthy of the utmost veneration, ranking behind only the Quran and Ali's Najm al-Balagha. Ali ibn al-Hussein was born in Medina, according to most sources, in the year 38 after Hijrah, or 658-659, the Common Era. He may have been too small to have remembered his grandfather Ali, who was killed in 40 after Hijrah, 661. But he was brought up in the presence of his uncle Hassan and his father Hussein, the Prophet's beloved grandchildren. Many Shiite sources say that his mother was Shahrbanu, the daughter of Yazdigir, the last Sasanian king of Persia. Thus he was said to be Ibn al-Khiyadatain, the son of the best two, meaning the Quraysh amongst the Arabs and the Persian among the non-Arabs. According to some accounts, his mother was brought as a captive to Medina during the Caliphate of Umar, who wanted to sell her. Ali suggested and said that she be offered her choice of a Muslim man as husband, and that her dower be paid from the public treasury. Umar agreed, and she chose Ali's son Hussein. She is said to have died shortly after giving birth to her only son Ali. There is no need to recount here the tragedy in Karbala in 61 after Hijrah, where Hussein and many of the male members of his family were killed by the forces of Umayyad Caliph Yazid, an event which shook the Islamic world and precipitated the nascent Shia movement. Zayn al-Abidin accompanied his father on a march towards Kufa, but he had fallen deathly ill and was lying on a skin in a tent. Once the Umayyad troops had massacred Hussein and his male followers, they looted the tents, stripped the women of their jewelry, and even took the skin upon which Zayn al-Abidin was prostrate. The infamous Shimmer was about to kill Zayn al-Abidin in spite of his helplessness, but Hussein's sister Zainab threw herself on top of him to save him. And Umar ibn Sa'd, the Umayyad commander, told Shimmer to let him be. Zayn al-Abidin was taken along with the women to the Caliph in Damascus, and eventually he was allowed to return to Medina. Several accounts are related concerning his grief over this tragedy. It is said that for 20 years, whenever food was placed before him, he would weep. One day a servant said to him, "O son of the God's messenger, is it not time for your sorrow to come to an end?" And he replied, "Woe upon you! Jacob the prophet had 12 sons, and God made one of them disappear. His eyes turned white from constant weeping, his head turned grey out of sorrow, and his back became bent in gloom. Though his son was alive and swelled, but I watched while my father, my brother, my uncle, and 17 members of my family were slaughtered all around me. How should my sorrow come to an end?" Zayn al-Abidin resided in Medina until his death in 95 after Hijrah. He was the object both of great sympathy because of the massacre of his family and of veneration as a great-grandson of the Prophet. He dedicated his life to learning and worship, and became an authority on prophetic traditions and law, but he was mostly known for his nobility of character and his piety, which earned him the sobriquet already in his lifetime. The details that have reached us about his life in Medina mainly take the form of anecdotes, affirming his constant preoccupation with worship and acts of devotion. He fathered 15 children, 11 boys and 4 girls. Now, I wanted to read an extract from one of his du'as. And the reason I did this is because since I was a young man and learning a little bit more about my faith, what I always wondered about was that Muslims is quite a generic term, and we are engaged in similar acts of worship. We used to praise, he fasts, he goes on pilgrimage. But what is a Muslim supposed to actually feel like inside? Is there a common theme? Is there a common thread on a state of being inside of us? So I come across this dua, and the first several verses took me to that place. And to me, in my mind's eye and in my heart, I very much imagine this is how a Muslim should be, should feel, and how he should pray, he or she prays. It's from his application of noble moral traits and acts pleasing to God. Listen now. O God, bless Muhammad and his household. Cause my faith to reach the most perfect faith, and make my certainty the most excellent certainty, and take my intention to the best of intentions, and my works to the best of works. O God, complete my intention through thy greatness. Rectify my certainty about what is with thee, and set right what is corrupt in me through thy power. O God, bless Muhammad and his household. Spare me the concerns which distract me. Employ me in that about which thou wilt ask me tomorrow. Let me pass my days in that for which thou hast created me. Free me from need, expand thy provision toward me, and tempt me not with ingratitude. Exalt me and afflict me not with pride. Make me worship thee, and not corrupt my worship with self-admiration. Let good flow out from my hands upon the people, and efface it not by my making them feel obliged. Give me the highest moral traits, and preserve me from vainglory. O God, bless Muhammad and his household. Raise me not a single degree before the people, without lowering me in its like in myself, and bring about no outward exaltation for me, without an inward abasement in myself to the same measure. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
सकीना बीवी के देखने को जो रंग से घर में इमाम आए सकीना बीवी के देखने जो रंग से घर में इमाम आए हरम जो जोड़ी पे मुंतजिर थे हरम सरा में तमाम आए सुना सकीना ने जख्मी होकर इमाम आली मकाम आए गए थे दरिया की सिमत بدن جو زخمی تھا سر سے تاپا بلا سراپا کی لے رہی تھی سکینہ بیوی کے دیکھنے کو درود ہے محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
آتے ہیں میرے خواب میں مولا کبھی کبھی آتے ہیں میرے خواب میں مولا کبھی کبھی میں دیکھتا ہوں حور کا جلوہ کبھی کبھی آتے ہیں میرے خواب میں مولا کبھی کبھی اٹھنا محال ہوتا ہے لنگر سے توق کے اٹھنا محال ہوتا ہے لنگر سے توق کے تھک کر جو بیٹھ جاتے ہیں تھک کر جو بیٹھ جاتے ہیں مولا کبھی کبھی آتے ہیں میرے خواب میں مولا کبھی کبھی کیا جانے کے خیال میں کھو جاتی تھی رباب کیا جانے کے خیال میں کھو جاتی تھی رباب خالی جھلانے لگتی تھی خالی جھلانے لگتی تھی جھولا کبھی کبھی آتے ہیں میرے خواب میں مولا کبھی کبھی آتا ہے ماں کے دل کو سکینہ کا جب خیال آتا ہے ماں کے دل کو سکینہ کا جب خیال سینے پہ رکھ کے سوتی ہے سینے پہ رکھ کے سوتی ہے کرتا کبھی کبھی آتے ہیں میرے خواب میں مولا کبھی کبھی کیا ظالموں کو مل گیا قتل حسین سے کیا ظالموں کو مل گیا جب تن سے جدا ہو گیا فرق شہ ابرار، جب تن سے جدا ہو گیا فرق شہ ابرار، سر کٹتے ہی لٹنے لگے شبیر کی سرکار، امداد کرے کون نا اکبر نالمدار، سر ننگے سراچوں سے نکل آئے سب ایک بار، نیزوں پہ رکھے ظالموں نے سر شہدا کے، کوفے کو چلے بیووں کو اونٹوں پہ بٹھا کے، سر ابن مظاہر کا بھی تھا نیزوں کے ہمراہ، پھر گردن رہوار میں باندھا تھا وہ سرعار، کوفے میں ہوا داخلہ سادات کا ناگاہ، اور آئے محلے میں یمن کے حرم شاہ، امبو تھے ہر سمت عرب اور عجم کے، رک جاتے تھے ہر ایک قدم اونٹ حرم کے، ایک قول میں کیا دیکھتی ہے زینب نالا، ایک طفل ہے پھاڑے ہوئے کرتے کا گریباں، روتا ہے یتیموں کی طرح باسر اوریاں، کچھ ڈھونڈتا پھرتا ہے ہر ایک سمت وہ ناداں، جو پوچھتا ہے چہرے پہ کیوں خاک ملی ہے، کہتا ہے چھری حلق پہ سید کے چلی ہے، خدمت میں انہی کی میرے بابا ہیں ستارے، کیا جانے پھرے یا گئے کوثر کے کنارے، ماں کے سوا کوئی نہیں سر پر ہمارے، ماں کے سوا کوئی نہیں سر پہ ہمارے، زینب نے ندا دی کوئی اس پر مجھے وارے، مظلوم کا بے کس کا مسافر کا پسر ہے، لوگوں یہ حبیب ابن مظاہر کا پسر ہے، جب تن سے جدا ہو گیا
صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين، صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله الآخر لأحد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ويا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. It's very common on the 11th of Muharram to wake up feeling quite tired because of the intensity of the azadari that we have done all these days. The intense grief, the staying up the night of Ashura, the Majlis during the day of Ashura, the processions, all the way through to Muhammadi. And so it's quite common to feel this sense of tiredness. However, in our tradition and in the tradition of most of the Shia communities around the world, the azar for Imam Hussain continues after Ashura. And it continues at least until Arba'in, and sometimes even beyond. And of course the question is, why does that happen? And it's quite simply because Karbala is not just about a journey to a martyrdom. It's not just about the journey to one individual and the groups around him expressing their complete ubudiyya and their complete manifestation of the divine presence. It's also about how that story comes to us, and it's also about the Masayib and the expression of the character and ubudiyya of those who were left behind afterwards, who were then taken as captives to Kufa and then later to Sham. It is that period, in many ways, of their captivity and what they had to endure that we continue to remember. That's why the period is so much longer. In many ways, the Masayib of Karbala have only really begun. They've only really just begun with Ashura. So this is an important sense of, understanding why it is that we continue this commemoration beyond Ashura. Because we are also engaging with the presence of those who are left and trying to experience their experiences. But I'm going to start as I did in last Majlis, with some of the phrases of the Imam in Ziyarat al-Nahya, and then I will repeat a hadith which I have mentioned before, which links me back to my topic of presence. And this is the last section of Ziyarat al-Nahya, which gives you a sense again of what I've been trying to say all along with these narrations at the beginning, which is about the global significance of what happened at Karbala. And I won't read the Arabic, I will just mention some of the translations. And so this is after the slaughter of the Imam. The Imam of our time says, and with this, the messenger, the Rasul, became very distressed, and his heart wept. And the angels and the prophets offered their condolences to him for your martyrdom. And your mother, Zahra, became distressed because of what happened. And legions of the favored, the most close angels came in waves, offered their condolences to her and to your father, and mourning commemorations, what we're reflecting here, but Majlis or Azar, were held for you in the utmost exalted places in heaven. What we do here is a pale reflection of the Azar which happens in the heavens. And even the whole of paradise strike their heads and faces in grief. They do love them. They hit their heads and faces in grief. And the skies and their inhabitants wept, as did paradise and its keepers, the mountains and their surroundings, the oceans and their fishes, the heavens and their servants, the house, the Bayt and the Maqam, the Kaaba and the Maqam Ibrahim, and the Mash'ar al-Haram, and Mecca and the sanctuary. But what's being presented is almost like a complete cosmology, a complete picture of what exists, which is all united in expressing mourning and seeking to present their condolences to those who have been bereaved. All the way up from the heavens and the highest, in a sense, the spiritual hierarchy of what exists, all the way down to their earthly manifestations, which in this case are given as Mecca and the sacred geography of Mecca. And that's quite important because one of the elements of the Islamic tradition is to understand how different parts of existence map onto other parts, how they're related. So the heavens, the highest, most parts of the heavens and the throne of God are then manifest in spaces in this world, such as Makkah, which is seen as a particular center. And then, of course, others like Majlis, Kufa, Karbala, and so forth. These are all places which are reflections of these higher sacred spaces in the heavens. And then from there it emanates, and that's what it comes to us as well. So when we commemorate, when we offer our condolences, as we did yesterday after Asr, when we condole the Prophet and the Bayt, we are merely in some ways imitating what the Prophet and the angels have done before us, and we continue to do that, and we imitate them. And in terms of our connection with the Ahlul Bayt, which I've been trying to emphasize throughout these days, just to repeat one short hadith which is quite well known, but I think it kind of expresses something which is the inner state of a believer. So it's reported that a companion came to Imam Salih alayhi salam. And he said, why is it that sometimes I wake up and I'm sad, and sometimes when I wake up I am happy, and I suddenly change sometimes in parts of the day. I don't understand this, what is going on? And the Imam said, this is very simple, it's because our Shia are directly linked to us. They are present to us just as we are present to them. Our hearts are connected. And so when we feel grief, you feel grief. When we feel joy, you feel joy. So this is that sort of connection that we want to cultivate. That's the presence that we want to cultivate. And that is precisely what we try to do throughout the year when we mark the Shahadat or the Wiladat of the Ahlul Bayt. We're doing precisely that. We are expressing sorrow with their sorrow, and we're expressing joy with their joy. And sometimes it can be simply by remembering the name, by the mention of the name. So that fundamental issue of the presence is really important. Now, what I primarily want to do today is I just want to quickly recap what I've been trying to say about the nature of presence, and then say something about how it is that we try to keep that going. Because it's quite often the case that we sometimes focus in a short, intense period of time, and we have that impact. I mean, there's no doubt that for all of us, the impact of these 10 days will probably be very clear for all of us to feel. You cannot not know this. There is no one who wakes up on the morning of Ashura or after Ashura has dawned or during the day who does not feel utter grief, because that's who we are. And in some ways that is that presence that we have cultivated since we were babies, or even before that. That's something which is central to us. But how do we keep it going beyond that? Beyond, even these 2 months or so? How do we keep it going throughout the year? And that's what I want to say something about as well. But first, just to quickly recap what I think I have tried to say. And a lot of it has been, I think, based on the idea that we really need to radically question the way in which we understand this thing that we call religion, and how it relates to other aspects of our life, insofar as we see religion as one aspect of our life. So we see deen as a particular facet, or we don't see deen as the totality of what we are. If we understand deen as the totality of what we are, so everything has an association, then it is very difficult not to actually understand the nature of the presence of God and of living there. It's not just when you pray, it's not just when you're sitting in a majlis, it's not just when you're fasting or doing hajj, it's every aspect of your dealing with other people, with your families, with your colleagues. It's every aspect of working in the world. All of these things should be an expression of how you see and live your deen and live the presence of the divine. And it's precisely this kind of modern distinction between, say, religion and politics, or religion and the secular sphere, which are problematic, which actually take you away from this constant sense of the divine presence and the presence of God, which is so significant. So that's the first kind of point. And then the path which I was taking you through is starting with this question of what the zikr is. What is this memory and this commemoration that we're doing? What is the point of it? Point of it, of course, being the realization of the divine presence and the presence of God. All the way through, with the discussion of Surah Al-Fajr about this culminating goal of being a true abd, which means that you would be successful in this world and in the afterlife, right? Successfully taken by the Ahlul Bayt, by the hand of it, all the way through to that final destination of everlasting life. Now, one thing I mentioned was that this notion of presence is directly associated with, of course, the idea of existence, but also centrally associated with the walaya of the Ahlul Bayt. That is the foundational, central concept of our tradition. There is no doubt about that. And it is the central concept of our tradition precisely because it's not just what links us to God and the nature of the reality that we live, but it's also fundamentally tied to this notion of presence. Walaya is about the bringing to being for yourself of that presence. It's about a set of relationships that we have. So, for example, God has walaya, the Ahlul Bayt has walaya, and we also have walaya. The question is, how do we relate? So, God's walaya is expressed in God's intimacy and closeness and love and compassion for everything else. And it's manifest through the Ahlul Bayt, whose walaya is not just defined in those terms, but also then is defined in terms of being expressions of divine providence. In a sense, helping out the divine plan, making sure things are in the right place. This is why the Ahlul Bayt have, this sort of divine power of control of the cosmos, control of creation. And then, walaya for us is not just our recognition of those things and our bringing to presence of those things for ourselves, but it's then also about how we treat each other. It's a very important aspect of it, which is that walaya is not just about a sort of a passive recognition of who the imams are and who they are. Walaya, in a second sense, also has a very clear implication for what it is that we now need to do. It's not just a recognition. The recognition requires a lot more. That's why I went through that hadith on the Ma'arifat al-Imam al-Nuraniya, which gave you the details of what that meant. But it has a very significant implication. It's not just telling you that there's certain truths that which you have to agree to, but there's also ways of being that you have to live and experience. And part of it was when I talked about the two kind of ethical models, which I think that notion of walaya as presence entails. One was this idea of it being a certain way of life. And as a way of life, it has these features of trying to follow a particular sage, someone who has achieved a certain status, and so you want to try and follow their particular path, experience their experience. Being part of the community of that sage, or following that sage, and especially this notion of the spiritual practices that are required for that way of life. And I mentioned a number of them. Most of them are very familiar to us in terms of the different ritual practices that we undergo and perform, but also we're talking about things like different kinds of zikr, we're talking about different kinds of pilgrimage, but we're talking also about sometimes about expressions like poetry and reciting something which makes that presence clear. And the other aspect of it was the exemplarism which leads to how it is that we try to follow those people, and then that has an implication for how it is that we deal with each other. So one of the fundamental things about walaya is what sort of person are you with your family, with your friends, with your wider society? Can someone who is an adherent of walaya be easily recognized by the way in which they behave in their communities, by the way in which they behave with their children, by the way in which they, when you go to pick up your children from school, or whether you're on the workspace or in other places, people say, yes, of course, this is someone who adheres to the walaya of the Muhammad. This is the sort of exemplary character that he has achieved. I think that's something which we all really do need to strive to do. Walaya and our tradition is not just about who we are, in ourselves. It's not just about a particular relationship with God. It's also about what our relationship is with people around us. And I think that element is extremely important. That's why there is an ethical imperative involved in our tradition. So, what I wanted to do then was to take that question of walaya into the ethical realm by looking at these teachings. And then also raise the question of beauty and aesthetics. because that is very much part of our tradition. That's one of the ways in which we understand the presence of the divine. The fact that our shrines have a certain look is precisely to give that sense of the divine presence. The way in which poetry works, not the way in which different kinds of sort of almost musical genres, so things like swords and salam, etc., they're music. We don't normally consider this to be music, but they are music because there's a sense in which there are things which, there are ways in which music makes you happy and there are ways in which music makes you sad. And the thing is, again, if it's music which is very much in the presence of the Ahlul Bayt, which is making you happy, then of course that is something which you should rejoice in and take part in. And if it's music that makes you sad with the presence of the Ahlul Bayt, again, that's the music which is important to our lives and which moves us and which motivates us in particular. So the ethical and the sort of aesthetic, the notion of beauty which arises out of walaya is very much, there are two mechanisms for motivating us to act in a particular way, especially with those who are around us. And as I said, with this end of being up. And the example which of course I gave was one of ziyarah, how it is that in particular one performs a pilgrimage to a place like Karbala, and how that pilgrimage then exemplifies the idea of Allah's presence, exemplifies the ethics of what it is that we are required to do and live, so much so that you think of pilgrimage as a small snapshot of the journey of life, so that the way in which you act and behave and deal with each other on the pilgrimage is kind of like what you should be doing all the time, even outside of that space. And with as I said, the aim of realizing this ubudiyyah, this being an abd, so that God calls you one of His creatures, just as He does that for the Ahlul. So that's the path which I wanted to take you on. And there's lots of kind of common features, but one feature which I think might be central to that whole thing, and there's a twin concept which lies at the heart of it, which is also the twin concept which lies at the heart of the whole of our theological tradition. And that is the notion of adl and lutf. Adl ultimately being God's justice, which then works its way through the justice that is performed and enacted by the Imams, and the justice to which we strive to work, the very notion of placing things in their right place. And then of course, the implications that has in the pursuit of beauty. The pursuit of beauty is also understanding things in the right place, in the right proportion in relation to each other. And lutf in the sense of God's grace that allows us to do things. It allows us to perform His justice. It allows us to fulfill the requirements of walaya. It allows us to make the presence of the divine possible here. It allows us to reach our destination by providing us with prophets and of course imams who give us the plan of what the journey is and then take us by the hand to that destination. So that was the broad kind of picture of what I was trying to convey, and I hope I managed to convey it broadly. Now the question is, how do you keep it going? And it's always the case, we have, throughout life and throughout the year, we have kind of ups and downs. That's perfectly normal. It happens with everyone. And in many ways, as I mentioned right at the beginning of these 10 days, one of the reasons actually why we have these majalis every year at this time is to give us this kind of reflection. Reacquaint ourselves with what it is that we're supposed to be doing. What is life supposed to be about? How are we supposed to be behaving with each other? How do we see God? How do we see the Ahlul Bayt? How do we understand the significance of these things? This is precisely what the Azhar and these Majalis give us every year. They give us this kind of refresher. They give us this kind of boost every year. This is why people who are not even, who would, for example, say they're not terribly religious or even practicing, will often still come to Majalis because it gives them that sense of who they are and who they want to be. We're all aspirational. We all aspire to be a certain kind of person. Even if a person knows they have faults, actually knowing that you have faults is always a good thing, because it's something you can then you can deal with. If you're not aware of your faults, then it's very difficult to correct that. And so coming to the Majalis allows them to reawaken something, which is significant. So of course, holding Majalis are one of the ways in which you keep things going. And by that I mean not just in Muharram and Safar, but also more regularly than that. I mean, we of course try to do that for all of the shahadat and the wiladat of the Ahlul Bayt, and we should. But for example, in many communities we have this practice, which I think is a very important one, of doing a majlis every Thursday night. That is a very important thing. Other traditions who are not ours, I mentioned a few right at the beginning, the Alawi Bektashis. The Alawi Bektashis, their ceremonies are every Thursday night. And central to their ceremony is precisely the remembrance of Qadr. That's central to what they do. So that's one thing, is regular majalis. Another one is a kind of a more immediate and effective fix, so to speak, is actually going to Qadr. And by this I mean not just necessarily going to Qadr for Ashura, Albani, for Yom Arafah, for the 15th of Sha'ban, which are the four famous, Munasibat as they're called, but also going to Qadr whenever you can. There is nothing, I would say, that cannot be solved by a visit to Qadr. That's precisely the point of it. The visitation to Qadr has many benefits we don't even necessarily understand it when you're doing it. But that's a very important way of doing it. Another couple of things which are more immediate, which don't require that sort of effort in a sense, as I mentioned, was Surah Al-Fajr. So the emphasis that we had in Tafsir on reciting Surah Al-Fajr in every prayer, or in both your compulsory and your non-compulsory prayers, so that it all constantly makes that link with the Imam prayerfully. An associated one is Ziyarat Ashura. A lot of us recite Ziyarat Ashura outside of Ashura, which is precisely what we should do. It has a specific significance for Ashura, but it's also, again, something which at any time is of benefit. In many Shia communities, one of the things that's said is that if you are in a dire straits, if you are in dire straits, if you are in great difficulty, then one of the best ways of alleviating that is precisely to recite Ziyarat Ashura. And there's three other things I want to quickly mention. And one that relates to the fact that Ali's been reading from the Sahih Sajjadiyya at the beginning. One of the things that we need to do is we need to familiarize ourselves with the actual works of the Imams. We have two works which there is little controversy about their association and attribution to the Imams, by which I mean the contents of the Nahj al-Balagha which are the sermons, the letters, the words of wisdom of Muhammadi. And of course, Sahifa Sajjadiya, which is this extremely important collection of supplications, but in many ways they teach you so much about what the nature of reality is, associated to Imam Ali Zainul Abidin. And these two works are really important. I would say it's still a bit of a sad indictment that to the efforts, I would say, the intellectual efforts of the community, that we still don't have what I would call good translations in English of these works, which are actually from a Shi'i perspective. And even worse, that we don't have other texts, which are not just ones that you can pick up and read for someone whose first language is English, so they can appreciate what their tradition is, but also ones which you can then show others who wanted to get a sense of what your tradition is. It's actually quite shameful that this doesn't exist. The best translation of the Nahj al-Balagha we now have is done by Ismaili, and it's a good translation, but the notes make it very clear that there's some very significant theological differences. And the Sahifa translated by the Munshiti, I have lots of issues with, many others do. Again, this is not someone who is part of our tradition and doesn't necessarily have the same attachment to why this text is so important for our tradition. And that's something which really does need to be removed. But generally, I would say that there should be an effort to attach ourselves to these words. And sometimes they can be done through things like, Bernard, for example, is a wonderfully good translation of Muhammadi Trust in English, done by Ali Khulqai, who also has, I think, probably the best translation of the Quran from our perspective. And that translation of Mafati is really useful. I think people should have that, especially those who do not have access to, for example, English, with the translation or other kind of translation to English is extremely useful. And the reason why I say these engaging with the words are important is because there's the direct presence of the words. But in a sense, there is also a wider sense of one of the things that a lot of people in literature have an idea of, which in many languages, the word for etiquette and behavior and literature is the same as adab, right? In Arabic, in Urdu, in Persian, etc., we use the same word. And there's a sense in which actually the writing and the reading of literature and the recitation, the composition of poetry, etc., these are all aspects of what it means to be human. It really helps you make a sense of what it means to be human. The pinnacle, of course, of those texts that you're reading, the act of reading is a way in which you can really become something, is, by the experience and the presence, of course, of the words of the Ahlul themselves. But there are many other texts which are also edifying and important, and which have always been part of a tradition of realization of what it means to be human. So, in the South Asian tradition, in the Persian tradition, these used to be texts, for example, in addition to those of the Imams, there used to be texts like the Gulistan and Bostan of Saudi, or there used to be things like the Diwana Hafiz, or the Nasari of Maulana. I mean, these are really important texts, which are precisely ones which, engage, through their beauty they attract, because they bring some sort of sense of that presence there. So, an actual serious engagement with literature and the arts is something which is absolutely needed in our communities, just as much as other kinds of writings and other kinds of practices. And then the final thing which I would mention in terms of trying to keep that sense of presence going is one of the points I mentioned earlier a few nights ago, which is this notion of the muhasabah, of the accounting, at the end of every day. If you can't do it every day, maybe every few days. Try to set aside a bit of time where you try and reflect upon yourself. You try and reflect upon what it is that you've done good, and as the hadith says, give thanks to God because you've done good, and reflect on certain things, and you say, well, don't just have regret for things you did which were bad, but try and fix them. So if the thing which you did was wrong, was to wrong someone, then of course you fix it directly by dealing with that person directly and by asking for their forgiveness or trying to fix it. If it's a sin or if it's something else, then you seek forgiveness from God. But throughout this, again, as I mentioned in the hadith, was what the Imam say, imagine you are presenting your amal to them. How would they feel about these amal? And that should help you understand, to a large extent, whether something about which you're not quite certain whether it was good or bad. Because sometimes things happen and you're not quite sure if you did the right thing, if you did the wrong thing. So then the question is, think about the criteria. What's the criterion? So, simple criterion which the Ahlul is suggesting is, okay, present it to us. What do you think we would think of it? And that should help you get your answer. Now, there's of course many other things which could be said on that, but these are just a few simple tips, a few simple things which seem to be fairly obvious in many ways, but also which are relatively manageable as well. I'm not asking you to, there's lots of other ways in which you can get the presence going. I mean, would that we were all like Sayyidina Zainab and we would tahajjud every night in even the greatest difficulty. Well, or not. So it's a question of thinking about what it is that can be done and looking at different kinds of things. And in fact, that is the point where I want to then continue, is precisely with Sayyidina Zainab. There are so many masayib after the afternoon of Ashura, and I can't obviously go through everything, but I am going to just indicate a few things which, just reflecting upon it, has such an impact. The immediate question after everyone had been killed was, what about the bodies? And one thing we know is that the bodies were dealt with in certain ways. Every single body was beheaded. And in most cases, these bodies were beheaded right in front of those who had lost their loved ones. And in one case, the most savage one we know was when a spear was struck into the ground and a tiny baby body was taken out and his head was severed off. So one thing was the head was severed. The second thing was, because they had a tradition of humiliating those who they defeated by having their bodies trampled, bodies were laid out to be trampled. And one thing we know is that many people came and took certain bodies away because they said, we're happy killing these kinsmen of ours, but we won't allow them to be humiliated by having their bodies trampled. And one thing we know from the Muqatil is that there was only one body which was left, which still was to be trampled, and that was the body of Imam Hussain. Every other body was taken away. And then, of course, we have the attacks on the camp, the burning of the tents. And again, there are many masayib like this, but I just want to mention two which are very famous, which also give you a sense of the character of those people who were in the tents alongside those who were killed. One is a very famous story that we have of someone who was in the army of Yazid, of Ibn Sa'd. And he reports that he saw a young girl whose shirt was on fire. And so he goes towards her, and she, seeing him in fear, recites a very famous Quranic verse which says, "And as for the orphan, do not treat her badly." And so in response to this, he says, no, I'm not going to, I just want to put out the fire. And so he goes ahead and puts out the fire. And for a short second, she's soothed by this. But then she says, Sheikh, if you have done this aspect of kindness to me, do me another kindness. And he says, what is it, young girl? And she says, can you tell me which way it is to Najaf? And he says, why do you want to know where Najaf is? Not really even known at that time. He said, because I want to go and complain to my grandfather and all this happened to my father and my brothers. So the tents are burnt. And we have the other very famous count in the Maqatil that in the evening, finally, some water, some food comes to the camp. And as Sayyidah Zainab gathers together all the women and children, and she says, there's a bit of water here, so maybe you can quench your thirst. And Sakina comes, and she says, no, there's some water, so Allah says, yes, here, take some water. And she takes them and she runs into the field, into the battlefield. And Zainab, of course, says to her, where are you running? And she says, well, have water, so maybe now my little baby brother will be able to be quenched by this water. The next morning, they are all told that they have to leave. They are tied up as prisoners. The Imam is put in chains. He has a chain around his neck, and they are forced onto camels without saddles, without any kind of covering, so they're bareback on saddles. And we have a famous account where everyone is ready, and the Imam looks very pale, and Sayyidah Zainab says to her, is everything okay? Don't forget, you are the Imam of our time. We have a lot more to go through. There's a lot more to endure. And he says, of course, to her, that's all well and good, but Aunt, how do you think I feel when I look at the bodies of my father and my brothers and others who still lie unburied? Because that was the third issue of the bodies, was that they were not buried. Now, I want to finally just say a few words from when the Haram gets to Sham, which is a bit later. And Imam Sajjad gives a famous khutbah in the court of Yazid. And this khutbah is very important because it shows you a sense of how he is Mazloom. That in this setting he has to tell people who he is. He's the Imam of the time. He's the son of the one who has been killed. So he has to tell people who he is. And so he says, whoever recognizes me knows me, but whoever does not recognize me, let me tell you who I am. I am the son of Makkah and Mina. I am the son of Zamzam and Safar. I am the son of the one who the best person who wore clothes. I am the one who wore the best sandals, but also the one who was barefoot. I am the son of the best person who did the tawaf and the hajj. And so he starts giving you all these qualities which are associated with the Prophet, because he wants to say that I am the son of, like he says, I am the son who was taken by Gabriel to Sidr al-Muntaha. I am the son of the one to whom God revealed revelation. I am the son of Muhammad al-Mustafa. So this is the third thing he's doing. He's like saying what his relationship is with the Prophet. And then he's trying to say what his relationship is with Ali al-Murtala. He said, I am the son of Ali al-Murtala. I am the one who fought people until they said La ilaha illallah. I am the son of the one, the Sahib al-Zulfiqar. I am the son of the one who pledged allegiance to the Prophet twice. I am the son of the one who, the best of believers, the heirs of the Prophet, the destroyer of the unbelief, the commander of the Muslims, and so forth. I am the son of the one who defended the faith, who was supported by Gabriel. And he gives you all of these qualities of both the Prophet and Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he also says, I am the son of Fatima Zahra, the best woman of mankind, of humanity. And by this point, when he's saying this, people are crying. People are crying in the court. And so Yazid, to distract them, asks for the adhan to be given. And so the adhan stops this. And the Muezzin says, Allahu Akbar, and the Imam says, yes indeed, Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. And when the Muezzin says, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, the Imam turns to Yazid and says, tell me Yazid, was Muhammad your grandfather or my grandfather? Because if you say he was your grandfather, it would be an open line. But if you say he was my grandfather, then why have you killed his son and imprisoned his family? Why have you killed my father and brought his family to this city as prisoners?
Salam nashino pe sobhwaro गरीब देते हैं पुरसा तुम्हारे प्यारों का सलाम उन पर जिन्हें शर्म आए जाती है खुले असीरी की खाक आती है सलाम उन पर जो ज़हमत कशे सलासिल है इमामत की पहली मंजिल है सलाम भेजते हैं अपनी शाहज़ादी वसीय दिखलाई निसार कर दिए बच्चे ना बच सका असीर होके जिसे शामियों के नरवे में हुसैनियत है सिखाना अली के लहजे में सकीना बीबी तुम्हारे गुलाम हाजिर है बुझे जो प्यास को अशकों के जाम हाजिर हैं ये हश्र ये सदमे नए नए बीबी कहाँ पे बैठी हो खैमे तो जल गए बीबी पहाड़ बड़ी देर है सवेरे में कहाँ हो शाम गरीबा के घुप अंधेरे में ज़मीन गर्द यतीमी की सख्तियाँ बीबी वो सीना जिस पे के सोती थी अब कहाँ जनाब मादर शब्बीर को भी सबका सलाम अजीब वक्त है क्या दे तसल्लियों का प्याम अभी कलेज में एक आग सी लगी होगी अभी तो वो गर्मी ना कम हुई होगी नहीं अंधेरे में कुछ सोचता कहाँ ढूंढे तुम्हारा चाँद कहाँ चुभ गया कहाँ ढूंढे ना इस तरह कोई खेती हरी भरी उजड़ी तुम्हारी माँ भी उजड़ी है कोक भी उजड़ी नहीं درندے اور یہ بےوارسی خدا حافظ سلام حسن اسلام خفتہ ناشو سلام تم پہ شہیدوں کے بے کفن لاشوں سلام تم پہ رسول و بطول کے پیاروں سلام مہر امامت کے گرد سیاروں بچے تو اگلے برس ہم ہیں اور یہ ہم پھر ہیں جو چل بسے تو یہ اپنا سلام آخر ہے. I'll say
جاتے ہوئے روکے سجاد نے کہا السلام ہے بے کس بابا بے کس بیٹے کا سلام السلام علیک یا غریب حسین السلام علیک یا غریب حسین میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا میں ساتھ کو پی گئے بابا میں ساتھ کو پی گئے بابا قرآن سناؤں گا میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا ہو تم پہ سلام میرا اے میرے غریب بدر ایک قافلہ تھا تیرا ایک میں بھی چلا لے کر میں ابن حسین ہوئے بابا میں ابن حسین ہوئے بابا ظالم کو بتاؤں گا میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا زینب کو بن چادر جب دیکھ نہ پاؤ گے تم نو کس نام سے پھر قرآن سناؤ گے آواز میں تیری ہے بابا آواز میں تیری ہے بابا آواز ملاؤں گا میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا میں ایک بے کس پردیسی ہوں میں لوٹ کے آؤں گا ہم قید بنے ہوں گے دربار سجاؤ گا ہے تخت خلا میں اور सर तेरा रखा होगा, उस पल में सकीना को बाबा, उस पल में सकीना को बाबा किस तरह संभालूंगा। मैं एक बेकस परदेसी हूँ, मैं लौट के आऊंगा। मैं एक बेकस परदेसी हूँ, मैं लौट के आऊंगा। या हुसैन, या हुसैन।
मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन। वो आबिदे बीमार था, वो आबिदे बीमार था, चलने से जो लाचार था, चलने से जो लाचार था। और शाम का बाजार था, और शाम का बाजार था, और मुस्तफा की बेटियां मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, 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 या हुसैन। सलावत।
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا خاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين، السلام عليك وعلى ابنتك فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك وعلى وصيك وخليفتك أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك وعلى ولديك الحسن والحسين سيدا شباب أهل الجنة، السلام عليكم وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا قاطع البرهان، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، السلام عليك وعلى آبائك الطيبين وأجدادك الطاهرين المعصومين ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. صلوات.
Watch.